You're listening to the Westminster Canterbury Tales podcast, creating community to foster joy and well-being. Thanks for listening.
It's good to be with you again. This is Ben Fraser with Tell Me a Story from Westminster Canterbury on the Chesapeake Bay. And I have with me today Maxie Cannon. We're just so delighted you could join us. And you're living here at Westminster Canterbury. How long you been here?
Be 3 years this October.
Wow. Okay. So you told me earlier you were born in Richmond.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a family there. Tell us a little bit about being born there and what the place was like when you were born.
Yeah, I was born in the city of Richmond. My parents were very young when they had me, and so they had a lot to learn, as well as I had a lot to learn about that kind of a situation growing up. My grandfather worked for Furniture Merchants National Bank, and he made quite an impression on me because I saw him go to work every day in the 40s and 50s, dressed in a white shirt and wearing a necktie.
Yeah.
And that was something that I'd aspired to all my life. I wanted to be like that.
Yeah.
And he was very, very wise. And he just encompassed all of the personalities and beliefs that I wanted to. So he was quite an inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's family is from Virginia Beach, Virginia. Originally.
Oh, really?
So I've always come back and forth to Virginia Beach. They owned an enormous amount of land off of Northampton Boulevard behind Lake Wright. You remember Lake Wright?
Sure, yeah.
And I used to go back there, and it was really country because they didn't have sewer connections and all of that. Right. And they had all of the usual country stuff. You know, outhouse, it was all of that type of stuff.
This must have been at least 10 years ago.
And so that was her side of the family. My father's family originally came from South Hill, Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And they lived in Fulton Hill.
Okay.
Now, those are two big stories in itself. I'll make it short and sweet. My mother's family down here in Virginia Beach eventually sold an enormous amount of that land to Burger King Warehouse Distribution Center.
Wow.
You can't imagine how much wealth that brought to my family, to them. And they all moved out, and they did so well and established other businesses and did a lot. My grandmother, my dad's mother, his father and her, they lived in Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
And then they moved back here, and she moved to Fulton and purchased a huge home and provided an opportunity for all of her sisters and brothers. She was the oldest of 13.
Wow. And
they all came to Richmond, to the city, because that was extremely country, South Hill, Virginia, Chase City, all down in that area.
Yeah.
And it was like the movie that they put out, Lackawanna Blues. I don't know if you remember that movie.
No,
and the lady ran this big rooming house, and she had a big kitchen that spread across the back of the house, where she prepared the meals for everybody that stayed. And my grandmother had the same thing.
Okay.
And I used to be the little boy sitting at the counter watching her and talking to her.
Yeah. She
was my best friend.
Your grandmother?
Yes.
So you were close to your grandmother?
Oh, extremely.
Yeah.
And so that's the little mixture of my family. And then as I grew up
in Richmond,
I lived. My daddy always had these huge aspirations. He didn't attend college and stuff like that, but he was extremely astute and smart. And my mother did. And so as they grew up, I lived in predominantly black neighborhoods as well as predominantly white neighborhoods. And it was quite interesting, the changes that I saw.
So you had to learn how to get along in both of those situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did okay. I did well.
But it was a lot different then.
Yes.
Yeah. Not that it's perfect now, but it had to be, you had to do a lot of.
Yes. You know, it were things that I learned that, believe it or not, in the white neighborhood that I lived in, going to school, I was the only black kid in 4th grade class and
Really?
stuff like that back in 61.
Okay. Yeah.
They would say certain things, and I had no idea what meant, like the N-word. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that there was a civil rights movement going on, that certain groups of people thought they were better than others. I never really was taught all of that until one day I looked at the news.
Okay.
And I saw the water hoses and all that stuff going on down in Alabama with the
Martin Luther King.
the March Across the Pettus Bridge and all of that. And I asked my mom, I said, what is this? Why is this going on? Why are these police officers and everybody shooting water hoses on these people? And she explained to me what was going on. And my eyes opened up like, oh, my God.
So your parents and grandparents understood the racial divide that was going on, or whatever you call it.
But they never, ever...
But they never told you about it. They just expected you to deal with it, and you did.
Well, actually, I never saw them have any problems with it.
Okay.
My grandfather worked at a bank.
Yep.
He probably was one of few black people in the bank. Mm-hmm. And when we went out to eat, which we did a lot, we went to the places that were open to anybody who wanted to come down in Richmond, because Richmond was very racist.
Yeah.
You remember the sit-ins at the restaurants, Virginia Union University? So I never really knew what was going on. When we wanted stuff, we got it. And my grandmother worked for 2 doctors.
Okay.
So she was very worldly because they traveled the world and all. I just never knew all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But then when I wound up later on, my parents divorced, and we moved into a neighborhood where people were, I guess you would say like low income, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I saw things I'd never seen before.
Okay.
And it affected me greatly. Yeah. When people didn't really have food.
Right.
And we always had food. I didn't understand when people didn't have lights sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, what happened?
But that had to be hard when, your father and mother split. And you were
it was
with your mother, apparently.
Yeah, it was a little difficult. Yeah. My dad was always around, and my grandparents, and everybody was fine. But I saw what the others were going through.
In your community, it sounds like the family, not just the nuclear family of your mom and dad, but your grandparents and aunts and uncles also played a big part in your life.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. That's really a beautiful thing, I think, and something that I think our country has lost because we've separated ourselves so much to the smaller nuclear family and aunts and uncles and things like that. I know I have one son lives here in Virginia Beach and another one lives in California, and so it's harder to get time with him and with my grandchildren there. The one here, it's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to grammar school in Richmond and high school as well?
Yes, I graduated from John F. Kennedy High School in Richmond, which no longer exists. They changed the name to Armstrong, but that was more historic.
Okay.
But I went to school with Taylor Holton, the governor's daughter.
All right.
Eldest graduated from high school with me. Mm-hmm. Our school was integrated.
Right.
Really had no problems. We had a real good principal.
Right.
Who helped us to understand that we all were equal, and there was a certain manner in which as a society expected you to behave and carry yourself, and he was pretty good at implementing those things.
Oh, that's great.
I had a great experience in high school. I was in the top 100 students when I graduated. I did a lot of really good stuff, and I just had a great experience in high school. The other thing, my education, when I left high school, I really didn't learn a lot about college. From there, I went out. I passed a test to work for the DuPont Corporation.
Okay.
And I was one of 37 out of 100 or so who passed from their school. Okay. And I went to work for them.
All right.
And that was like one of the highest paying jobs in the city of Richmond at the time. This was way back in the 70s. Yeah. But I got there and didn't realize it wasn't for me. So I worked 90 days and I decided to quit. Yeah. A lot of people were set back, like taken aback and didn't understand.
Thought you made a mistake by quitting.
Yeah, but I didn't.
No.
And it's funny how that worked out, because I guess it was maybe 5 years later, I got married and started a family and stuff. Mm-hmm. And guess who hired me back?
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
And I delayed it because I went to college on my own, paid
Yep.
for it, went to 2-year school, and went to school and learned computer software and
Sure.
all that stuff. Couldn't find a job in '76. Was nowhere to get hired for that.
Yeah.
Called them up, and they said, "Yeah, we'll take you back." And then I asked them, could they wait, and they waited. And then I still didn't want to go back.
Yeah.
And they told me, "So you need to come get this job."
Yep.
So I wound up there, and I worked there for 16 years.
Oh, really? That long? Okay.
And I did a lot of good things. I worked in manufacturing, was in corporate, customer link rep, visited customers all over the country, managed OSHA.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I began to realize I could do a lot of stuff. And I refused to work in manufacturing and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why I took early retirement and left.
Okay. It's 16 years you can get a retirement there.
And they offered a package.
All right.
I had begun to work for corporate social responsibility program for the company.
Sure.
And I did extremely well. I raised $1.2 million.
Oh, that's
which
okay.
never, ever happened for them.
I cover your
since they've
salary.
been there. And I realized if I could do that for them, I could do it for others.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to leave, they were working on trying to make my position permanent. I didn't know what they were doing, but I had decided to leave, and I did. And it was one of the best things I ever did.
Leaving. Mm-hmm. Where'd you go?
I actually got hired by a marketing company.
All right. You went into marketing.
Yeah, this guy was impressed with my ability to negotiate pricing and stuff like that for corporations to purchase imprinted promotional items and all of that. And while I was there, in 1 year, they made $2 million in sales, and there's only 5 people, and they had never had that.
Wow.
So I was like, wow. He gave us all this big, he was just blown away.
Yeah.
So then I left.
Oh, you've got a theme happening here.
Yeah, I
You
decided.
do really well and leave.
Yeah, I just, it was fine. It was time to move on. I really wanted to work with nonprofits.
Okay.
Because doing the corporate social responsibility projects, worked with United Way for years. And I raised a lot of money. Of that $1 million went to them. And I realized I had the ability to get people to do things, to give, and to feel. And so I wanted to go into an at-risk community, and I did. I wound up working at Bethlehem Wilson Community Center, director of youth outreach services. They only had a $15,000 budget.
But they had you.
Tripled the budget.
Good for you.
Program stayed on all the pages. We were the highest funded non-national youth program in the city. It was a great run of 7 years there. And I worked with young people changing their lives and stuff.
That's great. How did you change your lives? Like just counseling, education, work? What?
Well, showing them the importance of education was key.
Okay.
But also providing them the opportunity and giving them the support to believe that they could go out and do great things. This was low income, high risk community.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times where I'm sitting in the office, I hear a window break, I look out, somebody done come down the street, broke into a guy's van, and he's the plumber and steal equipment, and I'm like, in broad daylight.
Yeah. I think one of the problems in our country is that there are communities where kids aren't given, as you say, a good role models. The people that have all the money are usually people doing drugs or pimps or something like that. And and the people that are working hard and doing that sort of thing aren't making as much money or driving as nice cars, and so it's very attractive.
Yeah,
for people to go into the wrong direction.
it is.
And so I love it when I hear people like you say, no, there's a better way.
Yeah.
And
I implemented a program called the Entrepreneur Development Program. And I taught them how to run small businesses.
perfect.
Oh, it was fire. They really loved it. They took over every role in development. Granted, people ask me, well, how did you get here? When I used to go to board meetings and represent the center,
Sure.
people didn't know where I came from. They want to know, how did you get here? Because the program was so successful, the city kept funding it, the city kept funding it and providing whatever I needed. I could walk in. But I taught them how to advocate for their own programs.
Good for
and
you.
they were very good.
Isn't that great?
Very good.
You gave them a vision,
Yes.
and a hope.
Yes.
And that's sometimes, the other thing I was thinking about, sometimes in some of these communities, the poorest schools are in those communities.
Absolutely.
Too. They're not getting funded by the city, as you said this one was. And I've seen that happen in the Tidewater area even. And I don't know if it's happening today because I'm not working in that area, but when I came here 30 years ago, I can tell you there were places that the school systems really needed to be better served by the larger community. So you were doing that. So now you're well into middle age.
Oh, I have.
And you were working with these kids. Mm-hmm. You left 16 years of doing the pond, mm-hmm. and now you're working with kids. Mm-hmm. Where'd you go next?
Well, I left that organization, and I went to work for the city.
Sure.
As the mayor responsibility coordinator for the city of Richmond, briefly. I didn't stay there long at all.
That's a surprise.
But I was introduced to the gentleman who ran, Ron Clark, who ran the Virginia Fatherhood Campaign for the state.
Yep.
And I began to run a fatherhood program in the inner city.
Whoa.
For dads who were having trouble seeing their kids, paying child support and all of that. So the governor asked me to sit on the quadrennial panel for child support for the mm-hmm. city. Mm-hmm. And I did, and I learned a lot about why there were problems and how the system worked. I ran public hearings, stuff like that, mm-hmm. and tried to get bills implemented to make change.
Sure.
Because a lot of men didn't know the rules, didn't understand why this was happening. And I got to hear a lot of stories about what they were going through.
Sure.
And actually, the governor was so impressed that he came to the East End of Richmond and gave us $10,000, bought a whole entourage, and personally gave it to us to thank us for running that program.
Wow. So
I worked that for pretty good, about 2 or 3 years doing that. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot about the system and, what men have to go through, how child support works.
Sure.
And they were just didn't know what they were going through, but they were hurt. Because majority of men pay their child support and take care of their kids. Mm-hmm. Contrary to what they would have you believe.
That's right.
They are paying and taking care of their kids, but mm-hmm. you just don't hear about all of that. Mm-hmm. And they're still having other issues. And the system is still not right. Still a lot of problems with that system. Mm-hmm. But I did my share. Mm-hmm. And we had a great run, and it was at the Peter Paul Development Center when I worked with that.
Okay.
Became the board president, first time in the history of 33 years they ever had a black person to be head of the board, and this is in the black community.
Isn't that strange? I'm sorry, that's strange. Yeah. But I'm glad you were. Yeah.
And they were struggling with funds, and I asked the guy to get me on the board, and believe it or not, the president of the board was leaving, and before he left, he met with me. I hadn't been on the board 6 months, and asked me, he said, I want you to take over. I want you to do this. I raised more money in 1 year than they ever had in history.
Wow.
I raised the most money in 1 year. And I had this thing that happened with everybody on the board. They all had the money. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, money was falling out the sky. And they didn't. I did that type of thing for Richmond Hill and the Medical Retreat Center. Mm-hmm. Guy heard me speak in a vestry meeting there and came to me and asked me, said, I want you on my board.
And what ward was that?
The Richmond Hill. It's a medical retreat center where you go and you sit back in solitude and all of that. And it's historic. It's up on Church Hill and got a great history, They were in the red, and they were in the black.
So there's a theme here. Mm-hmm. That you can raise money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's your key? What are some of the...
I'm hoping you would get to that. because I got tons of stories about that happening. Yeah. And I had to ask myself, well, what was I doing different? Mm-hmm. And one of the things is that I've always trusted in the Creator, mm-hmm. that God would do it. If He gave me the tools mm-hmm. and gave me the vision, I would make it happen. And He is real. Mm-hmm. That's all I can say. Mm-hmm. Even through my ups and downs and growing up, He always showed up. Yeah. You know, when I first went to the city and my parents got divorced and I went to the public school system, mm-hmm. I saw the differences. I saw books with 10 names in them. Mm-hmm. When I was in the county, every year was a new book.
Yep.
Okay, that was the first thing. Then I realized how far behind the school was mm-hmm. and what they were teaching. Mm-hmm. And what I was getting in the 7th grade, I had in the 5th grade.
Right.
And I realized it was not equal. Mm-hmm. And I was just shocked. This is real.
That's right.
You know? But I went to Boys and Girls Club, Salvation Army. You've heard of them? Mm-hmm. We had one in this inner city, not far from me. I went there, and we used to call it our gang, but it wasn't gangs like killing people.
No,
I understand.
It was
just like a little crew.
Yeah.
And we had some really good guys on our little crew. They won pass, punt, and kick contests. They mm-hmm. were sponsored by Ford, and everybody winning everything. And I'm sitting there, my brother now, you know, we from the county. Mm-hmm. I won the second highest award. The highest was Boy of the Year. I mm-hmm. won Golden Boy. And my brother looked at me. Everybody looked at me because I hung with all of them.
Yeah.
And that's another example. All through my life, it has been like that. Mm-hmm. It's an example of how I'm here at Westminster. Mm-hmm. I had no idea mm-hmm. that it would work out, that I would be able to move in here. Mm-hmm. But yet I'm here.
You are.
And it's where my dream was, to live on the ocean, and it happened.
Wow.
So I studied long and like, God, what is this? I sing.
Oh, really?
I used to sing a lot in church. I sung in choir for 30 years. I've sung in 2 choirs for 3 or 4 years. And
do any solo work?
Yeah, I used to do solo work. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. What kind of music do you like?
I sung anthems, gospel.
Okay. Gospel.
All of that.
Yeah, I like gospel.
But when people come up to you that's been in the church for years mm-hmm. or working in positions of administration and say you anointed. Mm-hmm. I've been told that some of your voice is anointed. Mm-hmm. That means it's moving people.
Okay.
It's making them feel something. And so I was like, okay, here we are. So now I realize that one of the things that I think I have, and I've had to accept, that I'm sort of an empath. Mm-hmm. You familiar with what that is?
No.
There are several types of empaths. I'm an emotional empath and intuitive. Is that when you hurt or feel or need something, I feel it.
It's like empathy.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And I do something. I can make something happen. If you're not doing well, not feeling good, I have this ability to read it mm-hmm. and home in on. That's how I've been pretty much successful. Anytime, for example, I went on that board, Peter Paul Development Center.
Sure.
They were struggling with funds. I wrote one letter and got $16,000 to $20,000 in 1 week.
Wow. From
a letter. And everybody on the board was like, we need to see this letter. Again, they don't know how you doing this. Yeah. They read it, and when that letter came back, and that director told me how much money came in, mm-hmm. because I knew the need. I felt it in that community, what they really needed. Mm-hmm. Bringing them in from that letter went something about an incident that happened over a gold chain mm-hmm. and what went down, and our goal is to bring people out of the darkness into the light, and not just wrote it all up. And it was moving. Mm-hmm. We here at Westminster, we're going to start a program called Sacred Ground. Mm-hmm. And Sacred Ground is a program that I work with the Episcopal Church in Richmond, St. James Episcopal Church, sure. one of the largest in the state. Mm-hmm. But again, the only one.
Yep.
Black person sitting there in the church out of 2,000 people. And they selected me, and I had quite an experience, and I learned a lot about why there's a lot of racial disharmony in this country, and learn what people just don't know. And Sacred Ground will open your eyes to what the Asians, the Japanese Asians, Black people, Indians, everybody went through in this country, and why there's still some animosity toward each other because of it.
Sure.
God gave us the tools to fix all of this, and we're just not using them. And so Sacred Ground will expose and explain a lot of things that particularly white people don't understand about other people of different cultures and colors. And I've had people crying. They didn't know, they didn't know how bad the history of slavery really was, or what happened to the Indians. I mean, you come into a country, all of a sudden you've been living here for thousands of years, and people tell you it's not your country. We don't need to go down that road and stuff. So I'm so excited that it's coming here.
Good.
And we have 20 people signed up already. People are coming up to me and say they can't wait. I mentioned it at the Juneteenth program we did.
Yes.
Was very.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, it was very nice to be able to do that.
That was a great program, by the way.
Thanks.
One of the better things that I've been to here at Westminster Canterbury.
We're going to build on that.
Good.
And so when I offered it, I'm on the Cultural Diversity Committee here.
Okay.
And I mentioned Sacred Ground and Jenny and Father Scott. It's an Episcopal-based program. It was started by Bishop Carey.
Okay.
And, he's ending his term now. But he's a mandate of building a beloved community.
Good.
That we should all love one another. And I believe Westminster is a place that should be like that.
Well, I'm Episcopal too.
What?
I go to Galilee. You probably go to Eastern Shore.
Actually, I haven't found the right.
You haven't found the church yet. Yeah.
So
no, you're still
maybe
looking. Well,
I've
try
attended
Galilee.
one. Okay.
You can be one of the 3 or 4.
But people ask me, so when did you? I've been Episcopalian all my life.
Well,
Actually, the Episcopal church I started was located in the inner city in the Black community.
Yeah.
Which is one of few.
Yeah.
But all my life, I've tried others, but I've always come back. Well,
we'll be praying for you.
Thanks. So I'm excited about.
Well, you should be about Sacred Ground.
Yeah,
you never stop, do you? Wherever you go, you keep. You keep pushing it and helping people, and that's that probably is an anointing on your life. That's great.
And I don't know, when I look at news and I look at people suffering, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be that way, but it puts something in me that I can help you. I'm gonna help you. Good. And I like to have the opportunity to do that. I think that diversity is really something that people are afraid of in some instances. And then you want to know why, and then they give you all these crazy reasons. And I'm like, well, you don't have to be a diverse community or environment to have these things that happen.
That's right.
But for some reason, that's America. It's funny to me that when we get into Sacred Ground, the history that I know, others don't know.
Yeah.
We were taught our history and the history of this country at the same time. We had to know both.
And it's important. History is important. And when we set it aside just for the sciences or that sort of thing, and you don't have a good sense of ethics and values and history and those areas of understanding and education, we'll miss out on something. And so I appreciate you bringing it up and reminding us how important history is.
It is, and God has laid a message to me years ago, and there are no lasting relationships without forgiveness. And God taught us to love and to forgive.
That's right, because we're all imperfect.
It's exactly. It's as simple as that.
There's only one perfect God.
As simple as that.
And he had to learn to forgive.
And parents, children have to learn how to forgive their parents.
That's right.
Parents have to learn how to forgive their kids.
Parents are imperfect.
Relationships, your friends that don't actually measure up to where you love them more than they loved you, and they don't have your back. You have to learn how to forgive. We don't have to become ruined enemies and stuff like that. And I think it's important that people learn that. And I think one of the problems is that we didn't practice that when it came down to some of the issues in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I think that Sacred Ground will be a great step for some people.
Well, it sounds like part of what Sacred Ground does is educate.
Educate, yes.
Yeah, and we need that. But also it probably, as I gather from what you're saying, inspires.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I remember in St. James, I mean, their history was deep into Southern culture. You remember when Richmond removed all those statues? And well, we had one right up 2 blocks from the street, Stewart, sitting there. And, the church history itself, when black people came to the church, they had to sit upstairs in the balcony. They couldn't sit downstairs.
That's right.
They had stained glass windows, giving thanks to Confederate soldiers and stuff like that. Yeah. And they used to tell me, Maxie, because I would want to ask questions like, why is this still here?
Yeah.
But they've changed a lot, and the Sacred Ground did it. When Black Lives Matter started, my church members got out, handed out bottles of water, hung signs up. They really were inspired to help. George Floyd opened the eyes to a lot of people in this country what was going on with police brutality. But it was going on for years.
Yeah.
So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Good.
And I am so glad to be here and to get to work with my community here.
Well, we're happy you're here, and we're also happy you agreed to be with us today and talk to us, share a little bit about who you are and what your life was like. And anything else you want to say in closing here?
Well, I think that this is only the beginning of what our community can be, and I'm looking forward to helping us get empowered to do greater things here at Westminster.
Thank you, Maxie.
Thank you.
And this is Ben Frazier. We'll sign off for Tell Me a Story.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Westminster Canterbury Tales podcast. Thank you for listening.